Welcome. Come on in. Would you sit in the aisle? Or at the aisle, I guess, not in the aisle. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Am I looking at people at home? Okay. Glad that you may be joining us at home. This is the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. This evening is on the religious grounding of environmentalism, and I'm Reverend Renjilian, here to help you ground yourself. Think about the groundings. I'm going to come out and stand right here near this bicycle. You have only a few days left to go ahead and put in a raffle, $10 for each chance you want to get. If you don't want this bike, but you want to donate it to one of our area agencies to be able to be useful to, say, someone who needs to get to work and needs reliable transportation, this is an environmentally sound way of getting around. The electric bike means you're pedaling, but it's giving you power. It's just cool. And I can't buy a ticket. Staff can't win. So, all right. So, to start us out, I'd like to remind us all of the story in Genesis as God moves over the waters and separates night and day and land from water, and the intricacies of the religious implications of the understanding of creation and us being in it. One of the things I was taught in theological school was how that story of Genesis, if you look at the King James version of the Bible, it's very agrarian. If you think of the people who are reading the translation, they are those who are educated in a largely agrarian-based society, pre-industrial society. The translations that have been made since then, since the industrialized rise, oftentimes use different language of how the world is shaped. Instead of God's Spirit moving over the waters, go ahead and look at a couple of newer translations, and you'll start seeing them more, we're shaping the world kind of attitude in some of the wording. So anytime somebody tells you, yeah, no, it's this way in the Bible, always remember that it's human beings who are deciding how the words get translated, and it's in the context of our culture, which is in a climate-controlled space, in electrified transportation, in many other different ways. So I'm going to start us out with a quote and a breathing visualization to have us come deep into the moment. And these quotes are from World as Lover, World as Self, 30th Anniversary Edition. Joanna Macy is the author. So the copyright starts in 1991. So indeed, this 2021 edition just out is 30 years. Here we have spiritual breakthroughs. One thing that I love about the ecological self is that it makes moral exhortation irrelevant. Sermonizing can be both tedious and ineffective. This is pointed out by Arne Naess, the Norwegian philosopher who coined the terms deep ecology and ecological self. He explains that we change the way we experience ourselves through an ever-widening process of identification. Borrowing from Hindu tradition, he calls this process self-realization, a progression where, quote, the self to be realized extends further and further beyond the separate ego and includes more and more of the phenomenal world. And then he goes on to say, unfortunately, the extensive moralizing within the ecological movement has given the public the false impression that they're being asked to make a sacrifice, to show more responsibility, more concern, and a nicer moral standard. But all of that would flow naturally and easily if the self were widened and deepened so that the protection of nature was felt and perceived as protection of our very own selves. I like that for two reasons. One, I'm not going to sermonize tonight, and I'm really glad to find a quote saying it's ineffective to do so. And the other is the idea that really becoming spiritually broadened can help us be better in tune with, in sense with, how our own selves are bound up in environmentalism. It is our own mistaken Western sense of our separateness, of our own ego, our own self, oh, well, this is me, I am a rock, I am an island, as the song used to sing in the 60s. That, no, we're not separate. This is all as an extension. We are a part of something wider. So I invite you into a breathing visualization. As it says in this book, and as we know, breathing is basic to most spiritual traditions, as well as to the system view of the world. It is, by its very act, recognition that we're not separate, isolated identities, but integral parts of the vast web of life. And as such, we're like neurons in a neural net through which flow currents of awareness, it says here, of what's happening to us as a species and as a planet. So I'm going to skip ahead and do the breathing exercise for those of you at home and those of you here in the room. Closing your eyes, focus attention on your breathing. Don't try to breathe in any special way, slow or long. Just watch the breathing as it happens. In and out. Note the sensations at the nostrils or upper lip, in the chest or abdomen. Stay passive and alert. As you watch the breath, notice that it happens by itself, without your will, without your deciding each time to inhale or exhale. It's as though you're being breathed by life. Just as everyone in this room, in this city, in this planet now, is being breathed, sustained in a vast breathing web of life. Now, visualize your breath as a stream or ribbon of air passing through you. See it flow up through your nose, down through your windpipe, and into your lungs. Now from your lungs, take it through your heart. Picture it flowing through your heart, out through an opening there to reconnect with the larger web of life. Let the breath stream, as it passes through you, appear as one loop within that vast web, connecting you with it. Now, open your awareness to the suffering that's present in the world. For now, drop all defenses and open your knowledge of that suffering. Let it come as concretely as you can, in images of your fellow beings, in prisons, hospitals, slums, refugee camps, scenes of war. There's no need to strain for these images. They are present in you by virtue of our mutual belonging. Relax. Just let them surface. The vast and countless hardships of our fellow humans and of our animal brothers and sisters as well, as they swim the seas, fly the air of this ailing planet. Now breathe in the pain like granules on the stream of air, up through your nose, down through your trachea, lungs, and heart, and out again into the web of life. You are asked to do nothing for now, but let it pass through your heart. Be sure that stream flows through and out again. Don't hang on to the pain. Surrender it for now to the healing resources of life's vast web. With the Buddhists, we can say, let all sorrows ripen in me. We help them ripen by passing them through our hearts, making good, rich compost out of all that grief so that we can learn from it, enhancing our larger collective knowing. Indeed, if no images or feelings arise and there's only blackness, gray and numb, breathe that though. The numbness itself is a very real part of our world. And if what surfaces for you is not the pain of other beings so much as your own personal suffering, breathe that through too. Your own anguish is an inextricable part of the grief of our world and arises with it. Should you feel an ache in the chest, a pressure in the rib cage as if the heart would break, that is all right. Your heart is not an object that can break. But if it were, they say the heart that breaks open can hold the whole universe. Your heart is that large. Trust it. Keep breathing. As you're ready, reopen your eyes. This guided meditation is in this book because it's one of those exercises to remind us sometimes we need to breathe through all the stresses that we encounter. Environmentalism being one of them, and you know, the upcoming environmental conference, and are the Russians really trying to slow the process, or whatever's going on, or the images we've seen of creatures which are suffering from various ills in our planet. Breathe it in, let it flow through your heart, compost, and go back out again. I offer this from this book, again, World is Lover, World is Self, because I believe that we cannot sustain ourselves in the face of the world and its suffering without having an exercise or two that helps us. And this particular one might be one you try again and again. You read the news on your tablet and you say, I need to do some breathing. You go out for a walk and you see trash on the side of the road. Breathing. And then, perhaps, you have the sustenance to take action in your life, in the world, in the community. I'm thinking of this because one of the courses that I'm about to start is a poetry and meditation class. And it's a class in which we spend time on the class poem and then come back and talk about our experience of meditating with it. And the mentor of the author of this curriculum, said that if we do not have spiritual grounding, we are like leaves that dry up and blow away. We lose our resilience. We lose the sense of the vitality that we are breathing in and out all around us. It becomes very difficult to continue in a quest for acknowledging and confronting what needs to be done in society. I pull open a passage in another book, Act of Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, is the subtitle, by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. And so this is a way of bringing Eastern religion perspective into this. And this is about the bodhisattva perspective. So the starting point for this process is to imagine yourself poised at the gateway into your present life. Think for a moment. If you need to close your eyes again, or you can listen with your eyes open. You're back before your birth into this lifetime of yours. For this incarnation, you will have the opportunity to take part in the great changes arising with the dawn of the third millennium. After many decades of growing danger, human civilization is bringing the world to a point of unparalleled peril and promise. The challenges take many forms: the making and the use of weapons, industrial technologies that poison and lay waste to ecosystems, people sinking into poverty. But one thing's clear: a quantum leap in consciousness is required if life is to prevail on this planet Earth. Hearing this, you decide to renew your commitment to life and re-enter the fray by taking birth as a human living on Earth at this time, bringing with you everything you've ever learned about courage and community. This is a major decision. It's a hard decision because there's no guarantee you'll remember why you came back and no assurance that you will succeed in your mission. Furthermore, you may well feel alone because you probably won't even recognize the many other bodhisattvas who, like you, have chosen to be born into this time. Take a moment to reflect on your willingness to take a human birth in so challenging a planet time. It's your bodhicitta that calls you. Yet this is such a harsh time, and you're aware that you may be born into a life much touched by suffering. Every human life is by necessity a particular life. You can't take birth as a generic human, but only as a unique human shaped by particular circumstances. So feel yourself stepping into these circumstances now. Imagine that you chose them in awareness of how they will help prepare you to serve the flourishing of life. Step into the year of your birth. The timing of your birth allows you to be affected by particular conditions and events. Step into the place of your birth. What country did you choose? Were you born in a town or a city or on the land? Which parts of the earth's body first greeted your eyes? Which skin color and ethnicity did you select? And what socioeconomic conditions? Both the privileges and the privations resulting from those choices help prepare you for the work you are coming to do. Into what faith tradition or lack thereof were you born this time? Religious stories and images from childhood, or the very lack of these, influence how you see and search for your purpose. Now here's an important choice. Which gender did you adopt this time around? Which sexual preference? And as to your parents, what parents did you choose? As a father, a mother, or fathers or mothers? This might mean your adoptive parents, as well as your birth parents, both the strengths and the weaknesses of your parents, both the loving care you received and the hurts you experienced, help prepare you for the work you're coming to do. Are you an only child? Or do you have siblings in this life? The companionship, the competition, or the loneliness that ensued from the choice will foster the unique blend of strengths you bring into your world. What disabilities did you choose and take on this time? Challenges of body or mind can deepen your understanding of the difficulties and capacities for others. Certain strengths and passions characterize this life of yours too. Which mental, physical, and spiritual powers and appetites did you choose for yourself in this planet time? And last, imagine you can for a moment see it clearly. What particular mission are you coming to perform? You see, each of these choices relates to your active life and not any fantasized alternative to it. What you're doing is seeing these choices from a more encompassing dimension of consciousness, as though you're remembering an important part of your identity that may have been hidden from view. With this process, you're becoming reacquainted with the bodhisattva within you. I invite you back into this space, but to remember this exercise. It's another way to ground yourself in the midst of turmoil and travail as you're suffering and wondering. Imagine that the bodhisattva you are had chosen to come into this world the way you came in, for a reason. With this grounding in place, I'd like to introduce a half-hour interview, well, barely an interview, a half hour of listening to Reverend Fred Small. Reverend Fred Small is rated as one of the 15 top religious environmental activists, and that's a pretty big deal. He has sung his way into environmentalism. He has walked his way in. He has met and sat with deep religious thinkers from all over and all traditions. And he's a Unitarian Universalist who is going to come and have a Saturday workshop and a Sunday sermon at the UUs of Hendersonville coming up. The workshop, I think, is April 10th, and the sermon is Sunday the 11th. So he wanted me to mention that in particular because he forgot when he's coming. But we can watch now Fred, one of these grounded individuals, talking about being grounded. Good. Thank you, Fred, for joining in this little conversation. So yeah, as we're setting up this interview and all, I'm really interested. You have an event coming up in Hendersonville, this church here. And
that's right. I don't have the details on that in front of me. So if you could share those with your congregation at the appropriate time, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about what you are hoping out of that time?
I sure can. I'll be preaching to the congregation, and I'll also be offering a workshop, which is called Give Light, Spiritual Support for Climate Activism. I think, the more you know about climate, the easier it is to get deeply discouraged. And that's why I feel that, we have so much information, and there's so many wonderful organizations and initiatives that are engaging with the issue as a matter of policy and politics. And at the same time, our souls are, in many cases, under assault, and they are undernourished. And I know, as someone who's been working on climate justice issues for decades, it takes a lot of intentional spiritual practice to sustain oneself through these difficult times. And unfortunately, I think that the times are going to only get harder in the coming decades. I think there will be tremendous suffering. There already is tremendous suffering, as we know, around the world from climate change impacts, direct and indirect. And unfortunately, I do think it will get worse before it gets better. So if we are committed to engaging in the struggle for climate justice and a sustainable society and a more equitable society, I think we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to take care of our spirits. And that's
now,
really
Fred,
what,
I can interrupt you for
is about.
The readings that I present is for, quote from I think it's Harry Schofield, who says, if we're not tending to this, we're like leaves that dry up and blow away. All the resiliency in us dries up and goes away. I myself have the sense that in most anything that we want to do to improve things around us, our home, this earth, the issues in social justice that we're approaching, the hard work of Black, Indigenous, people of color, equity, all of the pieces need us to be refreshed in order to be resilient in the work. So I appreciate this. It will be, I looked it up here, April 9th and 10th in Hendersonville. And so they gave us good heads up from October to then to know that this is coming up. But could you say a little bit of what you have done over the years yourself or with groups to help them get that well of refreshment to be able to do the good work?
Well, my first career was in environmental law. I went to Michigan Law School, and while I was there, I got a degree also in natural resources policy. This was back in 1978. And I practiced briefly as an environmental lawyer, and then felt the call to music. I was a singer-songwriter for about 16 years. And then segued into Unitarian Universalist Ministry, getting my MDiv in 1999 and being ordained that same year. It was also in 1999 that I presented at General Assembly my proposal for a green sanctuary program. There was already a green sanctuary handbook, but not a program. And I looked at the Welcoming Congregation program as a very successful model, it seemed to me, as a way to invite congregations into deeper engagement with an issue. So I thought, geez, the Welcoming Congregation is really a great program. Why don't we have something like that for environmental justice? And I proposed that in 1999 to what was then the Seventh Principle Project, and is now UU Ministry for Earth. And they loved it. And I was then embarking on my parish ministry, first in Littleton, Massachusetts, and then Cambridge, Massachusetts. But in 1999, I'd just been called to Littleton. So I told the Seventh Principle Project okay, great. I'm thrilled that you love the idea, and I'm handing it off to you because I got to figure out how to be a parish minister. And so they took it from there, and now over 250 congregations have become green sanctuary congregations, which is very gratifying. So I mean, I can talk about the policy work, but I think if I understood your question, you were interested in sort of the spiritual sustenance piece of it.
Very much.
And well, for one thing, music is very much part of that. I'm old enough, as some of us are, to remember the civil rights movement and how vital singing was to that movement. And unfortunately, over the decades, more and more Americans are getting, and in fact, people around the world are getting their music as consumers of a product that they download or they consume on Spotify or Amazon Music or a YouTube video. And what really resonates for me is the power of people singing together. I think there's a magic in that. And there's also, it's a wonderful metaphor for community and collective action, that there's a synergy in singing together, that you are more than the sum of the voices singing. And indeed, people who would probably say they have, I can't sing, or I have no musical talent or something. You get a group of people singing together, and amazing things happen. So I always like to invite people into song, and always feel sustained myself by the power of that experience. I think, well, I know for myself, meditation practice has been absolutely crucial. I was very privileged to go on retreat a number of times back in the 1990s with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen teacher and activist. And I continue to regard Thich Nhat Hanh as my primary spiritual teacher. And I just continue to reap just extraordinary benefits from that practice. Now, of course, there are many different meditation and prayer practices, but I do think that we really have to cultivate intentionally those moments of transcendence, of either rising above or burrowing beneath the surface. Because, well, I remember Gandhi went even further. Gandhi basically said, look, if you're going to engage in satyagraha, civil disobedience, you don't even think about it if you're not a theist, because it's too hard. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but I do think that it is very difficult, not impossible, clearly, but very difficult to maintain the work, the very, very hard work of justice making without a spiritual practice. I mean, we all know many, passionate and dedicated and brilliant political activists who have not done that inner work. And as a result, their activism is not only less effective, it is often counterproductive. I mean, there are activists with whom I would agree on every single issue, but I wouldn't want to spend more than 15 minutes with them because they've become toxic. Now that's an extreme case, but the interplay of the inner work and the outer work, I think, is crucial.
Thank you for that, Fred, for sharing your own personal interactions. I'm so impressed, grounding with Thich Nhat Hanh. And I found the area that I've moved to here to serve the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. This is a beautiful, temperate zone rainforest. And the mountains, the trails to be able to go on, the beauty as I go to and from my home to the church here, looking at mountains whichever direction I'm going. It's lovely. And I think that's a draw for many of the people who have arrived here to this part of North Carolina, loving the climate, loving the waterfalls, getting used to the fact of how much rain can come, but just the lushness and beauty throughout the year. I would think that that's helpful too, to be in the earth in places where it's nurturing. I know people who say, well, they're beach people, they're coastal people, or the folks who gravitate here tend to like the mountains. I know there are people who love the inner cities, but for me, it was always difficult if I was in a big city to, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, find the dandelion that has my smile. Maybe it's growing up through a crack of concrete, but much easier in this context.
Well, Bob, I think you raised some really important and complicated issues. I do think that, the human species did not evolve to flourish in concrete. That's just not part of our DNA. And many people live their whole lives surrounded by concrete. And they too have that spark of connection to the natural world. I do think, I love cities. I live in a city, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And the fact that I can't see the stars is impoverishing. And at least I can travel to places where I can see the stars. But some people live their whole lives and never see the stars. That to me is tragic. And, I'm, as someone who's, essentially belonged to the Sierra Club all my life, I understand that, our movement has to be a lot more than, let's, preserve these beautiful natural spaces for the affluent white, folks who can access them. So, I obviously, I think as anybody who purports to be a religious leader, I have to be comfortable with paradox, and I am. So I say yes to both, that we have to, as you say, find the dandelion that's coming through the cracks in the city, and just appreciate that. I've traveled in Japan, and of course there, the population density is tremendous, and yet, they've created these amazing, beautiful, tiny little oases in the city where nature is so beautiful. Of course, it's also very cultivated in those contexts. So I want to lift up both the tremendous richness of urban life, and also say, there is something special about being in the middle of what we would call nowhere. An indigenous person would never call it nowhere. But to be really immersed in nature. There is a qualitative difference there, and I want to celebrate both.
Before I forget, Fred, the lovely little confab we're having here may wander off in other directions, but I wondered, off the top of your head, is there a particular book that has been helpful to you in this work. Maybe spiritually, maybe it's more on understanding where to go and how to apply yourself in this area. But I always find myself, if a real person I know recommends a resource, I write it down in my notes and then say, some point I'm going to see about going to the bookstore downtown here and see if they could order it for me.
Well, there are many books. I mean, one that you may know already, which has some wonderful essays in it, is the book called All We Can Save, which is an anthology of writings by women on the climate justice. But that's a very, that's a terrific collection. A couple other books that come to mind, I mean, certainly the book that introduced me to Thich Nhat Hanh is called Being Peace. And that's a lovely, slim paperback. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh, and obviously you know his work. His genius is just the simplicity of his writing. English is at best his third language after Vietnamese and French. And maybe indeed it's the fact that it is his third language, that he, I mean, almost everything he says or writes is poetry. It's so concise and simple yet profound. So Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh is wonderful, and the story about the dandelion has my smile, which was I guess a brief poem by a student of his. That's in his book, Peace is Every Step. So either of those would be a great introduction to his work. Joanna Macy, an American United States Buddhist, has done some wonderful work called The Work That Reconnects. And a good introduction to her work is her book, Active Hope. And then finally, you know, I'm learning more and more from indigenous teachers, and one excellent book is called Sacred Instructions, which is by Sherry Mitchell, Sherry spelled Sherri, last name Mitchell, Sacred Instructions, subtitled Indigenous Wisdom for Living Spirit-Based Change. So all of those books are great, and you know, I could talk. I could go on and on with you know, many other titles, but that's a good place to start.
That's great. Thank you so much, Fred. Again, the workshop coming up in April at the Hendersonville Unitarian Universalists. I look forward to seeing that we get people out for that. Thank you for being part of this. What do you, in ending, what else would you say? Oh, I wish I kicked myself that we didn't ask you the right question. What would you ask of me, or what would you wish of the people in the room, or what did we leave out?
Well, of course, we left out worlds and decades of ideas and inspiration. I guess I would stress two things. One is I've been talking about the importance of spiritual nourishment, but that is also in the service of activism. It's, you know, the climate crisis is as I hope your congregation knows, is really an existential crisis. The amount of suffering that we are likely to face is really dire, and tragically, it will impact first and worst the most vulnerable people on the planet, who are least responsible for causing global warming in the first place. So I feel a moral imperative to do something. Look, I'm old enough to retire, and I would love to do that. You know, just put my feet up and read some good books and go to a few, spiritual retreats. I can't do that. I know too much. So, often religious environmentalists, they say, oh, this is, we got to do something. So we will, ban styrofoam from coffee hour, or we will upgrade the boiler. So, we're not spewing a lot of fossil fuels into the environment, and they'll do a wonderful job greening the congregation, and then they stop.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Of course, we've got to do that.
It's an act locally, think globally, but the jump to say, okay, so we've got this done. What's next? I would say, Fred, that's as a religious educator trained that way. This is part of the praxis theory. You are grounded in your story. You move ahead because of what you realize is of value to you. You do something, but then you reflect on it and realize that brings you now a new action to take, and then reflect on.
And the second point I'd like to close with is the importance of hope. And by hope, I don't mean optimism. I am not optimistic. Certainly not about the near term. How can you read the papers and be optimistic? But I'm deeply hopeful, because for me, and I'm certainly not the first person to make this distinction, optimism assumes, that okay, things are going to turn out okay. Hope proceeds regardless. Hope is a verb. Hope, as Václav Havel said, is an orientation of the heart, an orientation of the spirit. So it basically says, no matter how bad things get, no matter how bad things look, you keep engaging. And I love this saying, which is now a Disney song from Frozen 2, but it didn't start that way. There's a song in Frozen 2 about doing the next right thing. And I love that saying, because, sure, everyone wants to do the right thing, whatever that is, but the next right thing, it's so immediate and concrete. So look, I can't solve the world's problems, but I can do the next right thing. And so what is that? What is the next right thing to do, and do it?
Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you for the conversation, and it's great to have this time with you.
Thank you to our sound crew for making sure this all worked. And I'm grateful to Fred for his time and doing carving this little piece out for us to wrestle with tonight. I open the floor for questions. If any of you would like to ask a question, we have a microphone here, so you don't have to be right in my breathing space or whatever, but you're welcome to ask a question, or if you cannot move forward for that, we will see about bringing it to you. Anything, a comment even in this. Not yet. Maybe some future time. A lot to think about. Agreed. And I appreciate Fred has been doing this for, as he said, decades now. And he seems not to have just dried up. That's good. Speaking of, how long do you stick with things? Can can you put up the picture of me? This picture, it's a little clearer if you look behind you at the screen on the wall behind this hall. So the guy in yellow in the middle, that's me, Stop Polluting the Air. This is me as an elementary school student, Earth Day 1971. And we had invited our parents to come, and we had our Earth Day march with our protest signs. And it's been a while in this process, thinking back to the beginnings of Earth Day, and go from a kid to a elder adult whose kids have grown up, and realize, you know, we've been trying to focus, or I have been trying to pay attention for quite some time. You too may have been doing that. Sometimes that means stepping away from it. Thanks. Sometimes it means stepping away. Sometimes it means keeping engaged in new ways, finding new partners to do this with, and new perspectives to help do it with. I didn't get to listen to it, but my colleague Scott Neely pointed out that Krista Trippett interviewed Joanna Macy, and maybe it was Joanna and Chris, with the Active Hope book, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy. And a quote lifted out of that was a question for us. What if we lose the environment? Is this still a world worth living in? From my perspective, theologically, yes. We are here. This is our home. This is, yes, it's still a world worth living in. I'm concerned about the damage, but it's still a world worth living in. And I pointed out in another conversation that theologically, some folks are in a very vastly different perspective of the story of Genesis and who we are. We were cast out of the garden. We are cast out of the perfect place. We are here to use up the resources that are in front of us. And this has led to some of the problems we've had with exploitation of people, eradication of whole species, toxicity in the world. But the theological idea, and I'm totally not this theology, is this world is for us to use in this time of our sin, and then the next life will be fine. Use it up, throw it to the side of the road, because we're on a different, more important journey. That's definitely not where I am. That's not, I don't get that theology. I know it's out there, but I don't get it. So the religious undergirdings sometimes of the way people are doing their work in the environment, or imagining ourselves in the environment, changes. I was also given the reference to come and look at Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation blog. And the blog for today is called Original Goodness, and I'll read a good chunk of it here to help us end out. I started with Genesis, I'm ending with Genesis. So from Genesis 1:31, God saw all God had made, and indeed it was very good. That's the quote that starts the blog. And so Richard Rohr then says this: in Judaism, there is no concept of original sin. Instead of believing humans are born in sin, Judaism affirms our place in a very good creation. Rabbi Ellen Bernstein is a leading thinker about spirituality and the environment. Commenting on Genesis 1, she writes of humanity's responsibility to manifest the goodness that is our birthright. On the sixth day, God designs the land creatures, creates the first human couple, and completes the entire creation. In and of itself, an individual creation may be good, but when it can contribute to a larger interdependent ecosystem, it is very good. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The goodness of this day is further emphasized through the language used to describe it. While all the other days are referred to as a day, the sixth day is referred to as the day. The day is distinguished among all the rest. It is whole. Wholeness rests in the complete web of life. Both from an ecological perspective and from Genesis' point of view, goodness resides in the community, the web of life, in relations of the whole biosphere. All organisms interact constantly with their surroundings in an endless cycle of giving and receiving. No creature, human or otherwise, can live in isolation. That's the key concepts I'd like to leave you with as we end our time tonight. I'll hang out if anybody wants to chat privately with me, and to the folks who have been watching online tonight or at some later time catching up with this, feel free to reach out. Give me an email, revbob@uutc.org, and let's start a conversation. But I love that imagery that we have of God saw all God had made, and indeed it was very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here.